I got to start doing some truck videos to make up for all the lost time on all the videos I could be doing or have been doing or what have you. And I have a lot of videos in mind that I need to just get out just for my own benefit. You know, obviously I don't care if you like them or watch them or whatever, but I need to get them out. And one of them is there simply aren't many white people left, and I thought I'd talk about the repercussions of that over a period of time. A lot of people don't understand this, but the whole idea of white flight and the occupation of downtown, I'm going to do a video on downtown, the satanic nature of most Masonically laid out cities, which would be all of them, you know. We have this idea, this concept of the city on the hill that started with Ronald Reagan, but it's not really, it doesn't in any way predate Reagan. And what I mean by that is that most cities were carved out of very unpleasant places by very ingenious methods, but they really weren't meant to be there, and they were largely following either some form of transportation line, be it it's quite interesting actually, because there's three forms of lines that started in this country. First there was the river boats, so the rivers, the waterways, and then there was the stage lines, and then there were the telegraph lines, which largely were on the highest ground possible, and largely the rail lines followed the telegraph lines, and that's the way it pretty well went in the past. And you know, the highest points of ground all over, and then of course the towns were built along the rail line, so that's how it all happened, so to speak. But you know, these towns were satanically laid out, and you can see the effect of them today is that they will turn anybody into a Satanist if you live in them. You know, people say, oh, it's the blacks did it all. You know, I don't believe it was the blacks. I used to believe that like everybody else, and obviously blacks just have a higher, to some degree, or had a higher at one time, tolerance for living in those areas, and they've largely lost it, honestly. You know, they've lost it just the same way whites have. So in everything has been subjected. Whites were here first, yes. They were the first non-barbaric people to live here, and everybody missed the point about the way the Indians lived. The Indians lived a certain way because they were afraid of certain things on this land that I think was fundamentally cursed in a lot of ways. So the Mormons, I think, were onto something, but we'll explore that theory another day. Let's get down to brass tacks. The brass tacks are whites don't like downtowns or urban areas and cities. Old towns, whites don't like it anymore. They go in and gentrify, and then they die there because there were those millennials that moved in and gentrified old areas, and they largely are going to die there of the AIDS, and you know, they paused the areas and basically killed them dead. So now they're going to get replaced. We're talking about late Gen X, early millennials. They gentrified all these areas. The rent's high, whatever. You know, we push the blacks out. We make it safe to live in, and we bring nothing with us. We made these areas completely sterile, and now we're going to have to bring in more immigrants to settle them for the interim period. And it's always an interim period because nobody can live in those areas for very long. A lot of people don't realize this. You know, people think, oh, it's terrible. You know, the blacks get gentrified and get kicked out just like everybody else, and the next wave of immigrants is going to be the same way. People tend to forget about Agenda 21. I haven't heard anything about Agenda 21 in years. I knew about Agenda 21 before Glenn Beck decided to use it as a scare tactic, and that is Agenda 21 is based on the UN projection of the population maps for a lot of places in North America in 2080. It shows zero population, like there is zero inhabitants in a lot of areas. That's the gist of Agenda 21. How they go about that, you know, it's whatever. But the only white people around are largely over 50. People say, oh, that's an urban phenomenon. No, it's all over. You know, there's only a very small minority of white people having kids, and a lot of them are having kids with mixed race people, be it Asians or what have you. You know, so you're having a good percent, and you know, a lot of people are also having kids with mixed race or light-skinned foreigners, be they Asians or Mexicans or what have you. So, oh, my kid's white. No, he's not. That doesn't count. Hugh White doesn't count. You know, the bottom line is, once in a while, it really doesn't hurt to have somebody like me. You know, I think of myself kind of like Chiron the Centaur, you know, the half man, half horse. And I have a little touch of Snapping Turtle in there too. But I have a good sense of this. People don't realize there are no Indians left. Yeah, there are no Indians left. You know, you completely destroyed the American Indians, the natives, the native peoples, the native peoples. The thing is, I don't really believe in natives. I don't believe the Indians were here that long. I don't believe they were here for 1,000 years, you know, honestly. If you actually study native legends and what have you, I don't believe that the natives were here for even 1,000 years. And I think there were civilizations and, you know, people here before them. Were they European? Some of them were. Is the Book of Mormon correct? Probably not. But I think I don't think the Israelites settled North America, but I believe there was, you know, a substantial civilization. I think the 7 cities of Cibola existed at one time, you know. So, you know, you get down to brass tacks when you go through a major metropolitan area and you realize there really aren't many white people. And most people don't get around that much. That's the thing. People live in their own bubble. I'm one of the few people who doesn't live in a bubble, you know. I go into the ghetto, I go, you know, into the rural areas, I go all over. And, you know, so I have a much broader perspective. You know, back going as far as the Ron Paul movement, I thought I was going to be really slick. You know, I was young, didn't know better. I was like, you know what, we're going to go all the ghetto places and talk to all these people about how Ron Paul's going to make their lives better. And that gave me my first realization, not that, you know, you can't really, people don't have a political consciousness, and that people really aren't interested in any sense of sovereignty or don't have any concept of sovereignty or the political and so forth and so on. But the bottom line is, yeah, it was impossible to talk to those people. It was impossible to talk to white people too, don't get me wrong, you know. It was impossible to talk to almost, you know, if you actually went door to door and had an experience, you know, go door to door now. I highly recommend it. Go door to door as a salesman or as a census taker or for any reason. Go door to door and talk to people in their natural environment, in their natural habitat. Talk to the people of Walmart. And, you know, this is clearly happened. You know, there's the whites have drowned in the rising tide of color. If you go into any, you know, it's kind of like in France. They don't have any white athletes. All the athletes are foreign. And so France, people think whites are the majority of the population. No, they aren't. Most of the majority of the population are old whites, you know, basically people who no longer should exist. They're zombies. They continue to exist for political reasons for the short term, but the long term, they're sterile, they haven't had kids, they won't have kids, or they had 1.5 kids, which doesn't count. You know, having 1.5 kids is the equivalent of having no kids. So the bottom line is there are no white people left. Now, in a lot of ways, this isn't the end of the world for the white race. You know, the example of Knoll, the chicken factories in Knoll closed down. And, you know, Knoll, they were completely taking advantage of the county, the corporation. I think Tyson's Chicken was completely taking advantage of them. And I remember years ago going to a school board meeting. Now, a lot of people don't know about school board meetings, but, you know, what are you going to do with the school board? Well, this wasn't a school board meeting. It was a meeting of candidates to be elected to the school board, and the guy was wringing his hands and said, we just can't get enough money. We can't get enough money. We have all these people, they speak 10 different languages. It really wasn't that many. It was like there's Marshallese, there's Somalians, and there's different varieties of Mexicans who don't speak the same language. And, you know, if you go to a pharmacy anywhere in the area, they have a linguistical chart with like 6 different languages, and you have to point to, you know, which language you speak, which dialect you speak, or what have you, because they brought all these people in to compete against each other in the chicken factory, so no one specific ethnicity could get the jump on things and, you know, demand higher wages. So what's interesting though is Tyson's abruptly closed the plant down, which means that there's no more need for these ethnics in this little tiny town and in this little, mediocre white county, which was, obviously on the CIA's list because back in the day, it was voted the least likely of any county in the United States to be bombed or suffer any, repercussions of a nuclear attack in the United States. It was that county in the United States least likely to, projected to suffer any. So the Waltons and, a bunch of generals and Air Force brass had holdings in this area, and so it was pretty well known to general intelligence. So yeah, we're gonna try this little experiment, this little village, and there's nothing they can do about it. But the point of the matter is that once the factory closed down, the people have no reason to stay, so they go somewhere else to be homeless in a larger metropolitan area, and the area largely goes back to being a sleepy white town until the last white people die off, and then you got nothing left, So, they closed down the mosque and all that good stuff. There's no more mosque, and there's no more Marshall Lee's rotten fish store, and there's no more cases of wildfire. So, at the end of the day, you have a situation in which these individuals are going to move on and going to find a new life for themselves, and you have ethnic cleansing. At the closing of a factory, you have ethnic cleansing. All of a sudden, with the closing of a factory, you have complete ethnic cleansing. So that's a very interesting situation, and you can have ethnic cleansing in a variety of ways, but the bottom line is that ethnic cleansing only happens because they want it to happen, and whites have to want to survive. And I was parked outside of Walmart the other day watching the people of Walmart, these subhuman detritus and ostensibly European genetic debris, and I was thinking, everybody has their part to play in history, and with whites, it's really a wanting thing. So the whites that want to survive, the good genes are going to survive. It's great. They're going to dwindle down to nothing, and then I think revive in their own way. So, obviously, life is going to become much harder for everybody, including white people. And my sole reason for being an ally, or in the past, to the white race and white nationalism and so forth and so on, is predicated on the idea that I don't want chaos. I want my life to be easier. I want to have running water and plumbing in my old age and so forth and so on. And chances are I'm going to lose all that, because for the simple reason that it's whites are just not going to pull it through and stay in control, and that's on them. They don't want to. Whites don't have a political consciousness. They don't even have a what's in it for me outlook anymore, it seems. And it's kind of bizarre, but it's that's everybody's got to play their part in history. I was thinking about that the other day, and that's their part in history, and it's for me, I've always tried to avoid playing any part in history for a variety of reasons. Being a historian, being who I am, I've had very little part in history whatsoever, being kind of an outsider or what have you. So I've never had a desire to play any major role in history, and I realize now that this is, people are going to play there. That is one biological imperative that, or biological, it's one human imperative that everybody's going to fulfill. So that's what's going on with white people, and what are you going to do about it? That's the people say it is what it is, but it really isn't. That's the mentality that brought them to this position. And good riddance.